The red wine hit my blouse like a bloodstain spreading across white fabric, and the laughter that followed cut deeper than any knife ever could. I stood there, frozen in the middle of my granddaughter's engagement party, watching the crimson liquid seep into the ivory silk I'd ironed so carefully just hours before. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock, but the damage was already done. Not just to my clothes. To something far more fragile. "Oh my God, Grandma Clarice, I'm so sorry." Emma gasped, but her voice was drowned out by the snickering that rippled through the crowd like poison. I heard it clearly. That voice from somewhere near the bar, loud enough to carry but quiet enough to pretend it wasn't meant for me. "Well, she never really fits in here anyway, does she?" Another voice joined in, sharper this time. "Nobody wants you here." The words landed like physical blows. I felt every eye in that room turn toward me, assessing, judging, dismissing. My son Richard stood by the fireplace, his expensive suit catching the light, his eyes deliberately avoiding mine as he lifted his glass to his lips. His wife Margaret pressed a napkin into my trembling hands without meeting my gaze, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light. "Here," she murmured, her voice dripping with false concern. "You should probably go clean up." But I knew what she really meant. "You should probably just go." I took the napkin. I didn't say a word. What could I say that wouldn't make it worse? What defense could I offer against people who'd already decided I was worthless, invisible, an embarrassment they tolerated out of obligation? So I did what I always did. I left quietly, like a ghost no one would miss. The drive home blurred past in darkness and silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, but I wouldn't let myself cry. Not yet. Not where anyone could see the cracks forming in the armor I'd worn for 3 years, ever since my husband Paul died and left me alone in this world. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly as cold and empty as I felt inside. I hung my stained blouse in the laundry room, staring at the wine spreading like a wound across the fabric. In the kitchen, I made tea with shaking hands, the silence pressing in from all sides until I thought I might suffocate from it. But something else was pressing in too. Something I'd buried deep for too long. A question that had been gnawing at the edges of my mind for months, maybe years. Why did they treat me this way? Why did my own son look through me like I was glass? Why did Margaret's smiles never reach her eyes? I pulled open the kitchen drawer where I kept Paul's things. The leather notebook sat there, worn and familiar, filled with his careful handwriting. Records of the company he'd built from nothing. The business he'd poured his heart into before cancer stole him away piece by piece. The legacy he'd left behind for both of us. Or so I'd thought. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages, seeing numbers and signatures and dates that should have made sense but somehow didn't. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time, and I'd been too grief-stricken, too tired, too convinced of my own insignificance to see it. The house deed. The company shares. The trust fund Paul had set up. Why had Margaret's brother, that smooth-talking lawyer with his practiced smile, been asking me to sign papers last year? Why had Richard suddenly started talking about better living situations and quality care facilities? Why had tonight felt less like an accident and more like a performance? My tea went cold as I sat there, papers spread across the table, my husband's words staring back at me from beyond the grave. And slowly, like dawn breaking after the longest night, I began to see the truth they'd been hiding in plain sight. They didn't just want me gone from their parties. They wanted me gone from my own life. The wine wasn't an accident. It was a message. A public humiliation designed to paint me as clumsy, confused, incompetent. The kind of woman who couldn't be trusted to manage her own affairs. The kind of woman who needed someone else to make decisions for her. Someone like them. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing steadied. And for the first time since Paul died, I felt something besides grief and loneliness flooding through my veins. I felt fury. But I also felt something else. Something colder, sharper, more dangerous. I felt the patient certainty of a woman who'd survived worse storms than this. A woman who knew how to wait, how to watch, how to move when the time was right. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They thought the red wine on my blouse was the final humiliation that would send me crawling away for good. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. Because the next morning, I made a phone call that would change everything. And by the end of the week, the ground they stood on would begin to crumble beneath their feet in ways they never saw coming. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most? Drop a comment and let me know your story. Leona Gray answered on the third ring, her voice still sharp despite being 73 years old. Clarice? It's 6 in the morning. I need your help, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Something's wrong, Leona. Really wrong. There was a pause, then I heard the rustle of bedsheets. I'll put coffee on. Get over here. 20 minutes later I sat in her kitchen, Paul's leather notebook spread open between us. Leona had been his friend long before she became mine, back when they worked together at the courthouse. She knew things about business, about law, about how people hide their tracks when they think no one's watching. Her fingers traced the pages, stopping at certain entries, her eyes narrowing behind her reading glasses. These dates don't match. What do you mean? Look here. She pointed to a company share transfer dated 2 years ago. Paul was in hospice then. He couldn't have signed this. His hands were shaking too bad to hold a pen by that point. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. But his signature's right there. Scanned and copied probably. Clarice, when did Margaret's brother start handling your paperwork? About 6 months after Paul died. Richard said it would be easier, that I shouldn't worry about the complicated stuff. Leona's jaw tightened. And the house deed? When did you last see the original? I tried to remember. The funeral had been a blur of black clothes and sympathetic faces. Then the endless paperwork, the signatures, Richard's patient voice explaining things I was too numb to question. I don't know. Maybe a year ago. We need to find it. Tonight. Leona stood, her movements quick despite her age. And we need someone who knows how to read between the legal lines. I'm calling Imani. Who's Imani? Someone who doesn't let rich people get away with theft. 3 hours later, a woman in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt sat at my kitchen table with a laptop that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Imani Cruz didn't smile much, but her eyes held the kind of focus that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy for thinking something was off. Walk me through everything, she said. Start from when your husband died. So I did. I told her about the fog of grief, about signing papers I barely read, about Richard's concerned suggestions that I simplify my life. About Margaret's brother showing up with documents that needed just a quick signature for tax purposes. About how they'd slowly, carefully convinced me I was too old, too confused, too broken to handle my own affairs. Imani's fingers flew across the keyboard. Do you have access to your bank accounts online? Richard set up the passwords. He said it was safer that way. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. Safer for who? That question hung in the air like smoke. She turned the laptop toward me, showing a screen full of transactions I'd never seen before. Money moving out of accounts I didn't know existed. Transfers to trusts with names I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic reviews. "They've been bleeding you dry for 2 years, Imani said quietly. "Slow enough you wouldn't notice, fast enough to matter." My hands started shaking again. "How much?" "So far? About 200,000. But that's not the endgame." She pulled up another document, this one with my signature at the bottom. A signature I definitely didn't remember writing. "This is a power of attorney agreement. It goes into effect the moment you're declared incompetent." "But I'm not incompetent." "No. But a doctor they choose, testifying about an incident where you showed up to a party disheveled and confused, spilling wine all over yourself." Imani's voice was cold. "That might be enough. The wine, the laughter, the performance. If you've ever had your reality turned upside down in a single moment, you know what this feels like." "What do I do?" My voice came out as a whisper. Leona reached across the table and gripped my hand. "We fight back. Quietly. Carefully. The way they should have known better than to underestimate." Imani nodded. "First step is freezing the assets they're trying to move. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow morning. But Clarice, you need to be ready. When they realize you're pushing back, things are going to get ugly." I thought about Richard's face turning away from mine. About Margaret's false sympathy. About the lawyer brother with his smooth words and practiced smile. About every time they'd made me feel small, worthless, in the way. "Let them come," I said. "I'm done being quiet." But even as I said it, my phone buzzed on the table. A text from Richard. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come by tomorrow? There's something important we need to discuss about your living situation." The trap was closing faster than I thought. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table sorting through every document Paul had ever kept, every receipt, every contract, every scrap of paper that might prove what was mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 3 years I'd avoided this room, this pile of memories that hurt too much to touch. Now they were the only weapons I had. By morning, I had 3 stacks. Papers that looked legitimate. Papers that looked suspicious. And papers that made my blood run cold because I definitely never signed them, but there was my signature, neat and tidy, like a ghost haunting me from the future. Imani arrived at 7 with coffee and a grim expression. "The freeze order goes before a judge this afternoon. But I found something else." She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a property listing. My house. The house Paul and I bought 40 years ago and filled with memories. Listed for sale at a price far below market value. "When did this go up?" "Yesterday. Same day as the party." Imani's voice was flat. "They're moving fast." My chest tightened. "Can they do that? It's my house." "Technically, according to this revised deed, the house is held in trust. And guess who controls the trust?" I didn't need to guess. Margaret's brother. The lawyer with the expensive suits and the smile that never reached his eyes. "We need to move faster," I said. "Already on it. But Clarice, you need to act normal today. Go to that meeting with Richard. Let them think everything's fine. Can you do that?" Could I sit across from my own son and pretend I didn't know he was stealing from me? Could I smile at the woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation? Could I stay calm while they tried to erase me from my own life? "Yes," I said. "I can do that." Richard's house was everything mine wasn't. Modern, sterile, expensive. Margaret met me at the door with that practiced smile, the one that used to make me feel welcome but now just looked like a mask. "Clarice, thank goodness you're here. We were so worried about you after last night." "Worried? Sure. I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice light. "These things happen." She led me to the dining room where Richard sat with papers spread across the table. The lawyer brother, whose name I'd learned was Kent, sat beside him with a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. "Mom, sit down." Richard's voice had that patient tone people use with children and the elderly. "We need to talk about your future." I sat. I folded my hands. I waited. Kent leaned forward, his smile professionally sympathetic. "Mrs. Duval, we've all noticed you've been struggling since Paul passed. It's completely understandable. Grief is difficult. I'm managing just fine. Are you?" Margaret's voice was soft, concerned, poisonous. "Last night you seemed confused, disoriented. The wine incident was an accident." "Of course it was." Kent's tone suggested he thought otherwise. "But combined with other signs, we're concerned about your ability to manage your affairs. The house is quite large for one person. The finances are complicated. We think it might be time to consider a more supported living arrangement." There it was. The trap springing shut. What kind of arrangement? I asked, though I already knew. Richard pushed a brochure across the table. Sunset Meadows Assisted Living. Beautiful grounds, smiling staff, old people sitting in wheelchairs staring at nothing. "It's very nice, Mom. You'd have your own apartment, meals provided, activities." "And my house?" A pause. Too long. Too careful. "We'd sell it, of course," Kent said smoothly. "Use the proceeds for your care. It's all very standard." Standard. Right. I picked up the brochure, pretending to study it while my mind raced. They wanted me docile, agreeable, defeated. They wanted the confused old woman who'd spilled wine on herself and left in shame. So I gave them what they wanted. "I suppose it does sound nice," I said slowly. "I have been tired lately." Richard's face lit up with relief. "That's great, Mom. Really great. We just want what's best for you." "There are some papers to sign," Kent said, already pulling documents from his briefcase. "Just formalities, really. Transfer of property, power of attorney, care decisions." "Could I think about it for a few days?" I asked, making my voice uncertain, fragile. "It's a big decision." The mask slipped on Margaret's face for just a second. Annoyance flickered in her eyes before the smile returned. "Of course. Take all the time you need." But I saw Kent's hand tighten on his pen. I saw Richard's jaw clench. Time was exactly what they didn't want to give me. As I stood to leave, Kent called out, "Oh, Mrs. Duval? One more thing. We'll need you to stop by the bank this week. Some signature updates required. Just routine maintenance." Routine. That word again. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind on fire. They were accelerating. Which meant they knew something. Or suspected something. When I pulled into my driveway, Leona's car was already there. She and Imani sat on my porch with expressions that confirmed my worst fears. "The judge denied the freeze order," Imani said without preamble. "Kent must have friends in the courthouse." My legs went weak. "So they can still sell the house, drain the accounts. Have you declared incompetent?" "Yes." Leona's voice was hard. "We need a different approach." "What approach?" Imani's smile was sharp as a knife. "We stop playing defense and go on offense. But it means taking a risk. A big one." The sun was setting, painting my house in shades of gold and shadow. The house where I'd raised my son. The house where Paul had died holding my hand. The house they wanted to take from me like I was already gone. "Tell me what to do," I said. And that's when they explained the plan that would either save me or destroy me completely. The plan was simple in theory, terrifying in practice. I had to give them exactly what they wanted while secretly documenting everything they did. "You'll be wearing a wire," Imani explained, holding up a device smaller than a button. "Hidden in your clothing. It'll record every conversation." "Isn't that illegal?" "Not in a one-party consent state. And you're the party consenting." She attached the device to the inside of my cardigan. "The goal is to get them to say something incriminating. Admit they forged documents. Discuss the scheme. Anything concrete." Leona squeezed my shoulder. "You can do this, Clarice. You're stronger than they know." Was I though? My hands trembled as I looked at myself in the mirror. Just an old woman in a cardigan. How did I end up here, preparing to spy on my own family like some kind of detective? The answer stared back at me from the glass. Because they left me no choice. The next morning I called Richard. "I've been thinking about what you said. About Sunset Meadows. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help." The eagerness in his voice made me sick. "That's wonderful, Mom. Can you come by this afternoon? We can start the paperwork." "Actually, I was hoping we could talk at my house. It feels easier here." A pause. "Then, sure. We'll come to you." They arrived at 2 o'clock sharp. Richard, Margaret, and Kent with his leather briefcase full of lies. I served tea and cookies like a good hostess while the recording device pressed against my ribs like a secret heartbeat. "So you've decided to move forward?" Kent asked, setting papers on my coffee table. "I think so. But I'm confused about some things." I made my voice quaver slightly. "The house sale. Where does that money go exactly?" "Into your care fund," Kent said smoothly. "We've established a trust to manage your finances. Much simpler than you handling it all yourself." "And who manages this trust?" "I do. As your designated financial guardian." There it was. First admission on tape. "But Paul left the house to me," I said, playing confused. "How can you sell it?" Margaret leaned forward with false warmth. "Clarice, you signed the papers last year. Remember? When you were having those memory issues." Memory issues I'd never had. But I played along. "I did." "Of course you did." Kent pulled out a document with my forged signature. "See? Right there." "Oh." I touched the paper with a shaking hand. "I don't remember that at all." Richard and Margaret exchanged a look. "Perfect," that look said. "She's more gone than we thought." "That's exactly why this is necessary, Mom," Richard said gently. "You're forgetting things. Important things. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore." I let tears fill my eyes. Real tears, because part of this hurt was genuine. I just don't want to be a burden. "You're not a burden," Margaret said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "We're family. We take care of each other." The irony was so thick I could choke on it. Kent pushed the papers closer. "If you could just sign here, here, and here. Then we can move forward with getting you the care you need." I picked up the pen. Let it hover over the paper. Then set it down. "I need to use the restroom. All this tea." In the bathroom, I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection. The device was still recording. I could hear their voices through the door, muffled but clear enough. "She's worse than I thought," Margaret said. "This is going to be easier than we planned." "Don't get cocky." That was Kent. "She's not stupid. Just grieving and isolated." "My mother's always been soft," Richard said, and those words hurt more than any wine stain ever could. "She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." I steadied my breathing. Let the anger fuel me instead of break me. Then I walked back out with a confused smile. Sorry about that. Where were we? The signatures, Kent said, tapping the paper. I picked up the pen again, pressed it to the page. And then, as if a thought just occurred to me, wait. If you're managing everything, how will I know the money's being used properly? Kent's smile tightened. You'll receive monthly statements. But I don't understand those. Paul always handled the finances. I made my voice smaller, weaker. Could you explain how the trust works? Just so I understand where my money goes. What followed was 20 minutes of them explaining, in detail, how they planned to liquidate my assets, control my finances, and essentially make me financially dependent while they drained everything Paul and I built. Every word recorded. Every admission captured. When they finally left, promising to return tomorrow for the signatures, I waited until their car disappeared down the street before I collapsed onto the couch. Imani emerged from the back bedroom where she'd been monitoring the recording. Her smile was fierce. We got them. Every word. But Leona's expression was troubled. This might not be enough for criminal charges. Civil court, yes. But criminal. Then what do we do? Imani's eyes were hard. We get more. And we do it tomorrow, when they think you're signing your life away. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Richard's voice saying I'd always been soft. Kept seeing Margaret's false smile. Kept feeling the weight of Kent's lies pressing down on me like stones. But underneath the hurt, something else burned. Not just anger. Something colder. More patient. They thought they'd won. They thought tomorrow they'd have me exactly where they wanted me. They had no idea I was about to flip the whole board.